Hi yogis, this is Elizabeth. Today we are going to be doing a tutorial on Parsva Bakasana, so side crow. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about Kakasana versus Bakasana. And I'm not sure if anyone is actually 100% right on what the terminology is, but I figured I'd review it with you, so in case you ever hear it in a class and you're like, what's going on? You'll know. So some yoga teachers will refer to Kakasana as crow and Bakasana as crane. So let's talk a little bit about what they're thinking. So Kakasana, crow, they're often referring to the variation of the pose where you're squeezing the legs into the triceps, like so. And Bakasana, they're referring to when you're bringing the knees into the armpits, finding that sweet spot where it slides down onto the tricep and lift up. Other yoga teachers will refer to both of those as crow Bakasana. So it just really depends on the teacher, it depends on the lineage they've learned from, who's right, probably doesn't really matter, but I just wanted to get you a little bit more familiar with that terminology. So then that brings us to side crow. So Parsva Bakasana, same thing. Some people might actually refer to it as side crane. Could we be any more confusing? Who knows? But either way, that's what we're talking about today. So we're going to break down side crow, and then I'm going to show you how to transition to a fallen angel from there. So let's get started. So for side crow, there's usually some important components that need to happen in a yoga class to help us build up to that peak pose. The first piece I'd really like to talk about is wrists. So you'll often have yoga teachers kind of give you some different like wrist things to work on to get your wrists going. We're not going to go through a lot of that today because otherwise we'd be doing a whole yoga class, and we want to get to the tutorial pretty soon, right? But one thing I would like to show you to help out with that wrist action is trying to really ground down through the knuckles. So we're talking about exactly where the fingers start to meet the hand so that we can take some of that pressure off of the wrist. So a really good exercise to kind of work on this at home, since we're all home right now, is we lift the thumbs away from the mat and we start to lift up through the hands, and then reconnect the knuckles back down to the ground, but keep those thumbs up. Cool. And let's keep moving through this. Do this for 10, 9, 8. You get the idea. If you're doing it this at home right now, your hands are probably starting to scream just a little bit because we're building some strength there, right? I lost count, but let's bring our hands back down to the ground. I want you to connect the thumbs back down to the ground, shift that weight forward for just a moment, and really feel the energy in your hands there. Yeah, that exercise is killer. Let's shake it out. Okay, next part of side crow, you have to make sure that you have a really warmed up core here and that you've done a lot of twists, right? And so as we go through a yoga class, there may be twists that the instructor is starting you off with, right? Or a side lunge, right? The twists are really important, and so when we go through those twists, when we're stacking in any of our poses, we want to make sure that we're really getting deep in those poses because we're going to need that for our side crow. So the next piece I'd like to talk about getting ready for side crow is opening up through the side body. So we'll often cue you at the beginning of class to do things like take your hands up overhead, grab opposite wrists, pull from one side to the other. We might talk talk about doing banana pose. There's all sorts of things that we can do to get into the side body. Side plank is a really good option, just to really help us open up and feel the length through the side of the body. So that's what that's all about. Next, I'd like to talk about neck. So if we're gonna go into a fallen angel variation, transition, it's really important that we take good care of the neck. That doesn't always happen with a side crow class, so I wanna make sure that you're aware of it in case that's something you wanna go into. And so warm-up poses for that would often include take your fingertips down to the ground, opposite hand overhead, reach for ear, pull the neck down, find that sweet spot. Maybe the hand comes up, fingertips go up. Ooh, yeah, there we go. And then other side, of course, right? But we're not gonna spend too much time doing that today. So here's an opportunity for you to kind of do some of those warm-up poses at home on your own. And then when you're ready, let's go into our side crow and then our fallen angel variation. Okay, so for side crow, I have a block at home. I know not everybody does. If you don't, that's cool. Maybe grab like a pillow from the couch or something soft that you can land on if you're kind of not as confident with your side crow. I like to keep it on the lowest level. You can bring it up if you're looking for a little bit more support. All right, so there's a couple of things that we would like to do with side crow today. There's level 1 and level 2. The levels have nothing to do with your value as a human being. I'm just gonna throw that out there. A lot of it just has to do with maybe how strong you're feeling that day. There's days that level 1 works better for me, and then there's days that level 2, just magic. So I'll go through both today so that you can play with those in your classes. So level 1, so I'm gonna turn this way, come up high on the toes. And the biggest thing about getting into side crow that I would probably recommend, often I see students keeping their hips down towards their heels. And what I would like to recommend is people work on lifting the hips up, 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 up. Get high on those toes, squeeze the thighs, the knees together. All right, next, we wanna make sure that the thigh is crossing the tricep. So we talked about getting deep into those twists in class. This is where all of that really adds some value for us. Press the knuckles down into the ground, right? Fingertips really engaged here. Lift those hips like we talked about. And then level 1 yogis, we're just gonna bring the hips up, up, up on top of the tricep. Lift, 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 start to bring the chest forward and pop up. All right, so what's level 2 all about then? Same thing pretty much, except the hip is not going to connect with this arm. You're like, what? How does that work? So we're gonna press back into those fingertips, lift the hip high, right? Oh, it doesn't work. Why? Why, Elizabeth? Why doesn't it work? Well, what I've kind of picked up on is that when we go into this transition or into this variation, that we actually want to have our hands not over on the side, but at a diagonal. What? Yes, the diagonal. That's the key for the level 2 yogis, right? So let's talk about that again. We're not here, we're not parallel with the top of the mat. If you get cued for a side crow, come to the diagonal. All right, so when you move into this, bring the chest forward, the chest is forward, 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 lift up. Side crow level 2. So I highly recommend that you feel pretty confident at least with the level 1 side crow before you try to flip over into the fallen angel. But sometimes we actually find ourselves in the variation of fallen angel by accident, by just trying to work through our level 1 side crow. So let's see what happens here. So my hands are going to be at this diagonal. I'm going to come up high on the toes, lift the hips, come forward, and I'm going to turn my gaze towards the knees as I start to bring my temple down to the ground. All right, I'm gonna keep demonstrating here. So then the next step is I want to bring this top leg up, point it up towards the sky, lift, lift, lift. And then the bottom leg can turn up. Fallen angel.